Hi everyone, thanks for joining our final webinar in the series on KPIs for Google Play apps and games. My name is Alyssa Perez and I'm on the Developer Business Growth team in Google Play. What my team does is utilize platform data in order to help developers like yourselves find opportunities and grow your business. Prior to joining Google, I worked on many different mobile game products and held various titles from Business Analytics Manager to Economy and Monetization Strategist and Senior Product Manager. And for those of you that attended our last two webinars, we did a high-level overview of the most common metrics for mobile developers and did a deeper dive into the most common metrics associated with acquiring and keeping new users. And if you missed either of those, feel free to check them out on demand at developersonair.withgoogle.com. Now for today's webinar, we're going to do a deeper dive into the monetization metrics, covering both in-app purchases and subscriptions KPIs. And again, this will be a great way to get an overview of the metrics, how they're related, and how they're calculated. And we'll also go into some things that you should consider for each. Now, as we covered in our Medium posts and our previous webinars, this is the metrics tree that we use at Google Play. And it's based around daily revenue. And remember that these metrics don't have to be on a daily level. You can change them to weekly or monthly, depending on your app's most important time frame. But let's quickly recap how to read this tree. Now, every metric has a parent, and if two metrics have the same parent, you're going to multiply them together in order to get the parent value. So for example, daily active users multiplied by average revenue per daily active user gives you your daily revenue. There's only one exception to this rule, and that's when the metric has a dotted line around it. In that case, you're going to sum instead of multiply. So for example, daily active users equates to the sum of new installs and returning users in your app or game. Now in today's webinar, we're going to look at the monetization portion of the tree, which is the right side, focusing on average revenue per daily active users. Now I do want to call out that these metrics that we're covering first are more targeted to the in-app purchase monetization model, especially because it is daily granularity. But the idea and framework across the metrics is the same for other monetization models, and we will cover subscriptions after IAP today so you can see the similarities, and we'll cover a few of the caveats that are different across them. So starting with ARPDAU, or average revenue per daily active users. This is the highest level metric on the tree, and it tells you how well you're monetizing your entire user base. So it's calculated as the total revenue that you've made in a day divided by the unique number of daily active users in the same day. And you can break this down into two child metrics that you would multiply together: daily conversion and your average revenue per paying user. But let's go through each of them. We like to break up the metrics that feed into ARPDAU into two types of monetization metrics. You have your primary monetization metric, which is your buyer conversion rate, which helps you understand how well you're converting your entire user base, and understanding your ability to get users to purchase for the first time, and then turning those first-time buyers into repeat buyers. The secondary monetization metric is average revenue per paying user, or ARPPU. And this is because it's only addressing the users who have paid in your app or game. And this is usually a much smaller percentage of your active user base. So optimizing this metric means you're trying to get a larger amount from a smaller set of users that have been willing to pay. And we like to say that focusing on the primary metric is where you should start. You want to go for breadth. How many users can you reach by creating monetization strategies that speak to the different segments of your entire user base? And you want to do that before you try to optimize how much you're getting out of buyers. We like to use the example of, is it safer to have 100 $1 payers or one $100 buyer? It's likely safer to have that 100 $1 payers, right? And that's because if we lose one, we still have 99 users that we can get revenue out of. However, if you lose that one $100 payer, all of your revenue is gone. So it's really important to focus on breadth and find the right balance between your primary and secondary metrics. But let's cover some of the things to consider to drive each. Starting with our primary monetization metric of daily buyer conversion. Again, this is the unique number of users that made at least one purchase in a day, divided by the unique number of active users you had. Now in this case, you can get your total daily buyer conversion by summing your new buyer conversion rate and your return buyer conversion rate. So both of those values on the bottom, new buyer conversion and repeat buyer conversion, are normalized by your unique daily active users, with the numerator summing up to the total unique buyers in a day. Now again, this in our opinion is the first place that you want to start optimizing, going for breadth and trying to convert a large set of your user base. And generally speaking, if you have a good freemium in-app purchase monetization model built into your app or game, you should see a positive correlation between your buyer conversion and your average revenue per daily active users. And that means that the higher the percentage of users that you can convert to a buyer, the higher you can expect your average revenue per daily active user. So with this metric, you have two levers that you can pull in order to drive it: increasing your new buyer conversion and increasing your return buyer conversion. But let's go through some of the considerations for converting users to purchase for the first time. If you have in-app purchases, you may already have some people that have decided to pay. Really try to use the data that you have to understand first purchase behaviors. What's driving them to make that purchase? How long does it take before they make it? And which SKU are they most commonly purchasing? It's really powerful information to help you understand what is going to drive a user to convert for the first time. You can also think about building out introductory offers or starter packs. Now, I'm going to start out with saying there's no one size fits all, so testing and optimization will be occurring regularly with these offers. But really think about which offerings are most valuable and how you can bundle things together in order to increase the perception of value for the opening offer. And maybe users won't convert on that first offer you give them, but if they're still active in your app or game 3, 4, or 5 weeks later, test how long that window is and see if there's an opportunity to resurface the same offer in hopes to convert them down the line as well. Now, one of the most important things that we like to talk about is clear value needs to be understood from the user for every offer that you surface. Whether it's a first-time offer or a repeat offer, every user needs to understand what they're purchasing and why it's useful to them. Therefore, ensuring that you allow users to engage enough time before you're surfacing an offer is really important because they need to understand, what am I doing in this app or game? What do I need in order to progress further or faster or gain access to something? And you really want to make sure that you're not driving this pay to engage style app with your freemium model. The last thing you want to consider is long-tenured non-buyer offers. Now, you probably have a set of users that have been in your app or game for a long amount of time, and they're adding that social value, but not necessarily monetization value. So really think through how you can give them a robust offer that's really valuable in order to get them to purchase at least once, even if it's at a small price point. Because if they're seeing good value in your app or game, they're likely willing and invested enough to make a purchase. And the last thing I want to call out here is price points are very, very important to test. We'll cover this a little bit when we get to average revenue per paying user, but for new buyer conversion, it's especially important to have a variety of offerings available, even outside of your introductory offer or starter pack. You want to make sure you're not pricing out a user by only having, say, a $4, $5, $6 SKU available. Maybe a user's propensity to pay is at $1. And really think about whether there's an opportunity to test this by market, as there are different kind of ability to pay for different markets. Now let's talk about some of the considerations for repeat buyer conversion. We all probably have a set of sales, promotions, content releases, or even events that we're creating or considering to create for our apps or games with our in-app purchase model. And that's because it's a really popular way to drive more buyers, specifically repeat buyers. But for all of your sales and events, it's important to be predictably unpredictable with them. And what I mean by that is if you always have your sale on a Saturday, your users will then understand, I can wait to make a purchase until that Saturday sale is available. So it's important for them to know that something is coming, but not necessarily know what it is, to ensure that you're providing the incentive to purchase even on a day that doesn't have a sale or an event. Some things we like to talk about are maybe running short-time daily deals once or twice a week, and that's going to give the opportunity to do a small incremental purchase. Maybe the sale is only available for 2 or 3 hours. It's at a small price point, it's a small amount of in-app assets, and it's not going to hurt your economy if you have one. You can also think about doing repeat buyer bonuses. So if a user makes a purchase, maybe there's a piggyback offer a few hours or a few days later in order to create the payer purchase cycle that you want to see. The other thing is surfacing relevant offers based on prior purchases. If you have buyers in your app or game, you know what they have purchased at, you know what price point they've purchased at, you know what they were willing to purchase, and maybe even what the driver was. So really use that information to make sure you're surfacing the right offer to the user. If a user normally makes a $5 purchase, it's probably not going to be a great offer to surface a $100 offer to them because they're normally purchasing at a very small price point. So it's also important to understand their need for a purchase. If a user just made a purchase, maybe they have a very large in-app asset wallet size, really think about whether or not it's worth surfacing another offer to them. Are you incentivizing asset hoarding when you do that? So you want to make sure that they have a specific need and a demand to make the purchase so that you see higher conversion on any offers that you do pop up. And finally, churned buyers. We all probably have a set of users that has purchased before and hasn't purchased in an extended period of time. These are users you can target with specialty offers based on what they purchased previously and maybe the length of time that they haven't purchased in. Is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, etc.? And trying to surface a meaningful and valuable offer to them in order to get them to purchase again and get back onto that pay or purchase cycle. Now let's shift to our secondary monetization metric, average revenue per paying user. This is the total revenue that you earned in a day divided by the number of unique buyers that you had in the same day. And it's calculated by multiplying the two children metrics, average transaction value, or how much a buyer spends on their transaction, and the average number of transactions a buyer makes. Now, generally speaking here, you would see a negative correlation between buyer conversion and average revenue per paying user if you have a strong in-app purchase monetization model built out. And that means that you would see a higher percentage of users the higher the percentage you see converting, you should expect a lower average revenue per paying user. And that's because you're getting a larger set of users to purchase at a smaller price point. But I do also want to share some of the correlations that we were able to identify across this cluster of metrics in the KPIs tree. So what you're looking at here is average revenue per paying user on the y-axis, with average transaction value on the x-axis, and each blue dot is representing a top game on play. Now yes, this is game data, but it is also true for apps as well. And what we can see is that the relationship is largely linear. So if you can get users to pay a larger price per transaction, then your average revenue per paying user will likely go up. And that makes a lot of sense, right? If users are only making a couple of purchases, the price point of each transaction is going to have a much greater impact on the average revenue per paying user. But when we look at the correlation between average revenue per paying user and the average transactions per buyer, that clean linear relationship doesn't exist anymore. So here you have transactions per buyer on the x-axis and average revenue per paying user on the y-axis. In our analysis, we actually couldn't find any equation that maps well to this relationship. And that's because the daily transactions are driven much more by things like your app design, your in-app economy, and in-app asset consumption habits than by anything else. So some things to consider if you do happen to see this kind of chaotic relationship is how many assets are you selling? We see that selling multiple assets for real money can naturally drive higher transactions per buyer as more things are available for real money purchase. So what types of goods are you selling when you are selling them? Are they CapEx or durable goods, or are they OpEx or consumable goods? We normally see durable economies drive fewer transactions because that purchase can last a longer period of time versus a consumable currency that will need to be replenished regularly. You also want to think about your velocity of money, or how quickly the purchased assets that are entering your in-app economy are being consumed. But more importantly, how can you speed this up by optimizing the content cadence that you have? If you run a large sale, how can you ensure that those assets are consumed by following it up with an engagement event to drive stronger engagement in order for users to sync those in-app assets that they purchased? Really think about what types of offers that you're selling, and are you incentivizing that asset hoarding? I gave the example of giving a $100 offer to a $5 buyer. That $100 offer can last the user an extended period of time and cause them to not have to purchase in the future for, 3 months, 6 months, however long it takes for them to consume 20 times the number of assets that they would normally buy. And finally, engagement is really important. We talked about this in the last webinar series, but engagement is key to monetization with in-app purchase models. It should be directly tied to the consumption of any in-app currencies to help drive additional demand for continued purchases. Ultimately, the design of your app and its in-app economy are imperative to driving these metrics. So try to understand any and all purchase behaviors in your title, going through each of these considerations to help you prioritize what to focus on. But now let's shift gears to subscription monetization model KPIs. Now, the tree on the left is going to stay exactly the same, but you can see the subscription monetization metrics on the right are a little bit different compared to in-app purchases. So let's go through them and call out some of the differences. So again, we still have average revenue per daily active user. However, in this case, we're going to break it out into two metrics related to subscription KPIs. So it's the conversion of your users into subscribers and the average amount of revenue you're getting from your subscribers. So let's actually discuss some of the differences in in-app purchase monetization model versus subscriptions. Now, in-app purchases are permanent. They are ownership. I'm buying something and I own it. However, subscriptions are usually access related. Maybe it's a content, but again, you're providing access to something that they can't have without the subscription. Now, from a user behavior standpoint, in-app purchases are more impulse purchases. I really want to get this character upgrade, or this gems offer is super kind of important to me, or it's a really great value and I want it to continue. But subscriptions is really unlocking an experience for a set amount of time. When I own something, I can choose how quickly I want to consume that. I can do it at my leisure. But if it's a subscription, I really am unlocking an experience for however long that subscription is available to me. So it's not just about how much do I value it right now, but it's also how much do I expect to value it in the future. Now, I do want to note here that I'm calling out access as a driver for subscriptions. Access can mean different things. It can be the content, maybe it's additional content, early access to content, but it can also be access to premium features within the app or the game. So if you consider a health and fitness app, for example, you're not necessarily unlocking additional content or getting early access. You're unlocking premium features within that content that allow you to engage in a more meaningful way than if I didn't have those specific features. So now let's talk about the subscriber conversion. It's similar to what we saw with the buyer conversion in in-app purchases. We can break it out into the sum of our new subscriber conversion and our repeat subscriber conversion. Now, thinking back to some of the differences that we talked about earlier, let's go through the considerations for subscriber conversion. Again, perception of value is one of the most important things for any monetization model. You really need to make sure that there's a strong perception of value. So you want to make sure you're allowing them to engage enough time to see why the subscription is valuable. But that also means whatever offering that you have, whether it's a monthly subscription, let's compare a monthly versus a yearly. Monthly subscription services need to show value more often and more consistently than annual subscription purchases. And that's because the perception of value for a monthly subscription may fluctuate and my willingness to pay will change. Versus if I buy the yearly subscription, I now have it for the full year, as opposed to having to consider whether I'm going to resubscribe every month. So I already mentioned this a little bit, but it's also talking about how much value do I see in it now, as well as how much will I see in it in the future. So if I was to purchase a 1-week subscription, I need to see value in it right now when I subscribe, as well as when I'm considering to resubscribe. So at the end of that week, do I still need it? So it's really important to make sure that the gap between what a user is getting and what a user doesn't is staying consistent throughout their subscription duration. Now, retaining existing subscribers can be very difficult, and that's because subscriber churn is usually related to two things. It's related to a user's needs and when a user's perception of value is changing. So if you think about a dating app, at the time that I'm using it, I really have a need for matches because I want to find love and I want to find a potential partner. So subscribing will drive additional engagement and give me that opportunity. But let's say I subscribe, I now have a bountiful set of matches, and I find a partner. My needs have now changed. Therefore, my engagement with the subscription is going to change, and therefore I may no longer need those extra matches or the extra content or even the service in general. So again, it is important to think about how are the subscribers' needs changing. You can also think about a streaming service. Maybe I'm really into crime television and you have a great crime kind of series. I see perceived value in that subscription. But once I finish those crime shows, it's what's left that I have to check is worth me continuing to pay for the subscription. Am I still inspired to watch your content that is outside of that crime series that I love so much? If it's not, then the value of me subscribing or the value of me continuing to subscribe is going down. So it's really important to think about how you are driving new content that is continuing to add perceived value throughout the life of their subscription in order to retain subscribers in your app or game. So when we talk about average revenue per subscriber, this is how much they're willing to spend for a subscription duration. So it's important to consider what types of subscription durations you're offering in your app. So this would be the pay period duration metric. Again, going back to really understanding your users and your offering. Do your users have a need for a 1-week subscription? We normally see that 1 month and 1 year are by far the most common subscription offerings, but maybe your users do have a need for a 3-month or 6-month subscription. Again, it's going to be based on the type of offering that your subscription is giving the user. But on top of how long you want to kind of provide them, you also want to think about how much you're charging for each duration. Usually the longer the subscription duration that you provide, you would see some type of percentage discount. So for example, if you have a monthly offering of $5 for the monthly subscription, and you have a yearly offering of $50, as opposed to the monthly one being purchased 12 times and at $60, that's a $10 discount if I purchase the yearly subscription model as opposed to the monthly. So we don't have any best practices for subscribing, but some things to consider are research the available price points for your competitors. It's not always a good idea to just copy, but it can give you an idea of what the right ballpark is. It can also ensure that you're offering an attractive price point relative to your competitors. It's also really great to consider the market and how much disposable income they have and how that may differ by market. So it's another really great way to start testing the different price points that you have for the subscription offerings in your app or game. Now, I showed something similar to this in the last webinar series. The user's engagement rate over their life cycle is very important to limit any general churn from your title. However, this time we're looking at the subscriber engagement from their first session throughout their life cycle. The most common reason for subscriber churn is lack of usage. Users are, of course, likely to cancel a subscription if they don't use it. Let's think about ourselves. If we have a real-world subscription like to a gym, and I happen to not go very often, I may start considering canceling that because I'm not actually reaping the benefits of continuing to pay for the subscription. So it's really useful to think about the reason that a user initially converted, because it's likely the reason that they'll continue to convert. So it's important to see the value that you're providing in your app or game and understand how your users are engaging with that app or game. And if you see it growing over time, that's probably a good indicator that your users will be retained. But if you happen to see it kind of falling off, that may be an indicator of churn or subscriber churn that you can expect. Now, if you have content, one thing to think about what is your core content or your tentpole content, and then think about the difference between that and your additional content. So we talked a little bit about it in the streaming service example with the crime series. Maybe you have a one-of-a-kind crime series streaming service, but what is the additional content that you have that is driving your subscribers to stay around? You really want to think about how else you're providing value to the users outside of that tentpole or core content that you're providing them. And again, it's important to track their engagement over their life cycle, because declining or even sometimes stabilization of the user's engagement, depending on your subscription offering, can be that leading indicator of churn. So if you see this trend, consider how you can continue to remind your subscribers of the value that you are providing them. Maybe it's through a push notification, or maybe it's just through like an email campaign, but again, showing them, hey, you have this amazing subscription, make sure you're using it. Now, I know we covered a ton of KPIs and different trends to help you track and optimize for different things, but ultimately, you know your product the best. So hopefully you can use these two monetization KPI trees to drive stronger monetization in your app or game, and remembering to focus on going for breadth before trying to get more out of your buyers, but also have seen another monetization model to help understand whether there's an opportunity to monetize your app in other ways. Hybrid models are becoming very, very popular in the mobile space, from ads to in-app purchases and subscriptions and every combination across them. You're going to know your product the best, and we're hoping to give you the right metrics to help you identify opportunities to improve your business. Thank you again for joining our Business Growth webinar series. We hope you've learned something new throughout our Medium posts and these webinars. And we'll be online answering questions, comments, and feedback in the comment section below, so feel free to drop us a note by clicking the blue button. Thank you.